He had done this deliberately because he understood something clearly. If he wanted to continue researching the extinction poison without interference, he would need a base of operations that belonged entirely to him. The staff members from the monitoring department congratulated him enthusiastically after the test. They praised him for reaching national rank at the astonishingly young age of 18. They also mentioned that having such strength would make it easier for him to receive research resources while avoiding constant supervision from headquarters. However, while the staff celebrated his achievement, Valerio was thinking about something entirely different. What he truly needed was access to rare medicines and biological materials required for his secret research. In order to move his plan forward, Valerio approached the chief of staff and respectfully expressed his wish to be transferred to the garrison of the trading city. As a powerful cultivator, he explained that he wanted to contribute there. Still, he understood that because of his young age, some people might hesitate to trust him with such responsibility. The commander listened carefully before accepting Valerio's request. He agreed to hold a staff meeting with the other officers so they could collectively decide whether Valerio should be allowed to take the assignment at the trading city garrison. In the end, the decision was made in his favor. Valerio successfully received an official assignment to the Chongsher garrison, a place far enough from headquarters that he could quietly continue his research into the extinction poison. However, the early stages of his experiments quickly revealed a problem. The test subjects died too quickly after exposure to the poison, which meant the toxin could not be passed on to future generations. Valerio soon realized that the real issue was the poison's high mortality rate combined with its weak infectious ability. To improve the research, he ordered his 2 level 9 cultivator assistants, Leland and Vincent, to go outside the city and capture fresh specimens. He specifically instructed them to prioritize high-level demonic beasts that might survive longer during experimentation. One seemingly ordinary afternoon, while the sun hung quietly overhead, a small pheasant-like demonic beast was happily wandering around and playing in the open fields. Without warning, it was suddenly captured. The creature's body trembled violently as it struggled inside the trap. Its frightened eyes stared helplessly at the cruel humans slowly approaching it, sensing that something terrible was about to happen. Later, inside the headquarters of the special branch, Valerio received the captured pheasant from one of the cultivators who had brought it back. Just then, a chubby man approached him with a cheerful voice. The man introduced himself as Chairman Chu, the leader of a powerful local merchant group. Chairman Chu looked Valerio up and down with curiosity. He commented on how young Valerio appeared and mentioned that he had already heard rumors about him being a genius from the Supreme Cultivation Academy. Valerio greeted Chairman Chu politely and gestured toward the cage beside him, where the captured level 5 pheasant was being held. Chairman Chu leaned closer to examine the creature carefully. What caught his attention most were the pheasant's bright eyes, which he admired as if they were rare gemstones from his personal collection. With a strange grin, Chairman Chu jokingly asked whether he could purchase the pheasant's eyes. Although Valerio felt disgusted by the man's bizarre hobby, he kept a polite smile on his face. Calmly, he explained that the eyes could indeed be sold, provided Chairman Chu was willing to pay a sufficiently high price. He even suggested that if Chairman Chu was interested in collecting unusual items, he could also take a look at other demonic beast specimens that might be available. Despite feeling repulsed by Chairman Chu's personality, Valerio understood that his research required enormous funding. Unfortunately, most of his personal savings had already been spent on experiments. Chairman Chu's eyes lit up with interest as he assured Valerio that money was never a problem for him. At that moment, as a man holding a sharp knife slowly approached the cage, the pheasant cried out desperately, begging them not to take its eyes. A heartbreaking scream echoed through the room as the pheasant felt unbearable pain. Moments later, the cries stopped completely. Soon after, Valerio's subordinate calmly handed the extracted eyes to Chairman Chu. Remembering Valerio's earlier instructions, the subordinate smiled politely and informed Chairman Chu that they had many other fascinating items available if he was interested in purchasing more. Around that time, Valerio had been experimenting with methods of gradually destroying the bodies of demonic beasts through infection. During these trials, he discovered that using smaller creatures allowed him to control the infection more effectively, since they did not die as quickly as larger beasts. He later brought Chairman Chu to the containment area where various demonic beasts were being kept. With a calm tone, he asked the merchant if any of the creatures caught his interest. When Chairman Chu expressed concern about whether the beasts might attack him, Valerio reassured him. He explained that one of his assistants possessed the ability to remove the creature's powers, leaving them completely harmless. Hearing that, Chairman Chu became increasingly interested and began selecting several demonic beasts purely based on their unusual and beautiful appearances. Among them were a bird with extraordinary wings, a strange creature with coral-like ears and bright eyes, and even a small rabbit-like beast. Valerio did not refuse any of these requests, realizing that the money would support the continued development of his research. With the financial backing provided by Chairman Chu, Valerio's experiments continued smoothly for a while. Then one day, his assistant Leland suddenly called him urgently to his office. Leland reported that the third variant of their poison had produced a strange result. It could force young demonic beasts to evolve rapidly, but the process severely weakened their bodies, draining their energy as if the evolution itself was slowly consuming their lives. After hearing the report, Valerio immediately asked the most important question: how infectious was the toxin? Leland explained the results of the latest clinical experiments. Unfortunately, the findings were disappointing. The poison could only infect a single demonic beast, and the transmission chain was easily broken, preventing it from creating the large-scale extinction effect Valerio desired. When Valerio asked how long the captured pheasant might survive under observation, Leland estimated that based on its weakened physical condition, it would probably live no longer than 1 year. Leland also mentioned that their research finances were slowly improving thanks to outside buyers. Inspired by this, he suggested opening a secret underground auction in the city to generate even more income. Not long after that discussion, a mysterious underground auction quietly appeared within the city. Among the strange items offered at the auction was a frightened cat girl locked inside a cage. She was displayed as a rare delicacy meant to be sold to wealthy customers who enjoyed collecting unusual living creatures. The bidders gathered around excitedly, whispering among themselves. Some wondered whether the cat girl was truly a demonic beast or if she might secretly pose some kind of hidden danger. The auction host quickly reassured them. He explained that these evolved demonic beasts had already been stripped of their special abilities and no longer possessed the power to harm anyone. However, he also warned that they needed to be treated gently. Now that their powers were gone, their bodies had become fragile, and rough handling could easily cause them to faint. Although some buyers remained cautious, many were fascinated by this unusual new product. One wealthy bidder even laughed happily, saying that a petite yet charming cat girl like this would make a perfect addition to his collection. Soon, these evolved demonic beasts became a trendy form of entertainment among the nobility. The growing popularity of the auctions created a steady stream of money flowing into the Valerio Foundation. After hearing Serenity reveal these shocking events, Zoelle looked at Valerio with burning anger in her eyes. With a trembling voice filled with grief, she accused him directly of murdering her child, Carmen. Zoelle screamed loudly in rage and sorrow, condemning Valerio for what he had done and swearing that she would never forgive him for taking Carmen's life. Long ago, Carmen, a curious little demon girl, had secretly ventured to the surface world simply because she wanted to see what it looked like. When danger suddenly appeared, Carmen cried desperately and begged her parents to come and save her. Unfortunately, while wandering alone, Carmen ran into Leland, one of Valerio's subordinates who specialized in hunting demonic beasts. Leland was amazed when he noticed the unusual abilities Carmen possessed. For a brief moment, he almost allowed her to escape, but greed quickly took over. Realizing that such a rare specimen would fetch an enormous price at the underground auction, he decided to capture her instead. Suddenly, Vincent felt a powerful surge of demonic energy approaching rapidly. The overwhelming aura clearly belonged to a national-rank demon. Realizing the danger immediately, Leland fled the area without hesitation, abandoning the captured Carmen behind. In truth, Carmen was no ordinary demon child. She was actually a princess, the only daughter of the mighty demon king. Her father rushed desperately to find her after sensing her presence, but by the time he arrived, the young girl had already been severely injured. Through tears, Carmen whispered weakly that she was in terrible pain. Seeing his beloved daughter suffering like that, the Demon King let out a furious growl that shook the surroundings. He demanded to know who dared harm his precious child. Believing that Carmen had been poisoned, the Demon King immediately rushed her back to the underground palace. Using his powerful abilities, he began carefully examining her condition while trying everything he could to treat her injuries. The ants gathered around the injured girl, releasing a gentle wave of aura from their bodies. Their energy flowed carefully into Carmen's fragile form, attempting to heal her wounds and stabilize her fading life force. Nico examined the situation closely and spoke with concern. He explained that Carmen had been poisoned, but thankfully he understood the nature of the toxin and believed there might still be a way to neutralize it if they acted quickly. Just as everyone was lost in anxious thoughts, Carmen weakly interrupted them. Her voice trembled as she softly said that she felt terribly cold and asked if someone could hold her for warmth. Hearing her fragile request, the prince's consorts immediately leaned closer, their faces full of worry as they gently embraced the little girl. Harlow could not bear to watch Carmen suffer like this and let out a heartbreaking cry. However, another prince quickly stopped him from moving closer. With a serious expression, he warned that the poison in her body might be contagious and that she could unintentionally infect everyone around her. Nico then stepped forward calmly and suggested that he should be the one to take care of Carmen. Since he had already come into physical contact with her earlier, he reasoned that the risk to him was already present. Suddenly, Carmen murmured again in a weak voice, repeating that she was terribly cold, her small body trembling uncontrollably. Dante looked down at his daughter, horror and pain filling his eyes. He tried desperately to control his emotions, but the sight of Carmen suffering broke his resolve. In the end, he leaned down and prepared to hold her. But just as the Demon King was about to embrace his daughter, Zoe suddenly appeared nearby. With a swift movement and the use of her power, Zoe gently but firmly pulled Carmen toward herself, refusing to let anyone else risk exposure. The weak and trembling Carmen looked up with relief and whispered that her mother had finally come to her. When Zoe heard her daughter say she was afraid of dying, her heart tightened painfully. She immediately reassured Carmen, promising that she would save her no matter what and telling her softly that everything would be all right. With fading strength, Carmen quietly told her mother how much she loved her. She explained that she had secretly gone to the surface world to search for Tori, a friend who had been captured by humans and cruelly had her eyes gouged out. However, while trying to help and rescue Tori, Carmen herself was discovered by humans and captured before she could escape. As Carmen tearfully recounted everything that had happened, she promised weakly that she would never go to the surface again. But as she spoke, her voice grew fainter, and her life force continued to slip away. Struggling to hold back her grief, Zoe gently told Carmen that if she felt sleepy, she should rest. If she felt cold, she would hold her. Zoe also promised that she would fulfill Carmen's final wish and rescue little Tori from the humans. At that moment, the Demon King's heart burned with overwhelming rage and anger so deep that it seemed ready to erupt like a storm. Meanwhile, far away, Valerio and his colleagues were continuing their experiments in the laboratory when a sudden loud voice echoed through the area, startling everyone present. The mysterious voice declared with cold fury that the humans responsible for these crimes would eventually pay for everything they had done. The immense mental pressure carried by the voice was overwhelming. One by one, the people in the room collapsed to their knees, unable to resist the crushing force pressing down on their minds. Back in the present, the rooster's face twisted with anger as he listened to the entire story. Veins bulged across his forehead, and his eyes turned bloodshot as he remembered the horrifying sight of thousands, perhaps even tens of thousands, of crippled baby demonic beasts imprisoned in that laboratory. Vivian stood frozen in shock after hearing her brother calmly admit to everything Serenity had accused him of. Despite everything, the rooster suddenly felt the urge to rush forward and attack Valerio in fury. However, Levi quickly grabbed hold of him and firmly held him back, urging him not to start a fight right there. The rooster stood there without moving, his teeth clenched tightly as tears streamed uncontrollably down his face. Serenity stared in disbelief at the scene before her. She was shocked that a demonic beast of national rank strength was actually listening to the words of a human. She then raised her voice and announced loudly that the Special Forces team had already completed an investigation into the illegal activities connected to the underground auction and had coordinated their findings with the department headquarters. To the shock of everyone present, the investigation revealed that the person organizing those filthy underground deals was none other than Valerio himself. Valerio responded sharply, arguing that showing mercy to one's enemies was simply cruelty toward oneself. In his view, demonic beasts would always remain humanity's enemies. Hearing such harsh words caused Mateo and Leon to exchange shocked looks. Serenity immediately fired back, questioning who had given Valerio the right to speak on behalf of all humanity. She accused him openly of betraying the very people he claimed to protect and declared that he was not a hero, but merely a man consumed by revenge. One day in the past, Valerio had violently swept all the materials off his laboratory table in frustration, shouting angrily that after countless experiments he still had not discovered a single successful infection. He struggled to understand where he had gone wrong. Despite combining countless demonic beast genes and using the most toxic biological materials he could find, his research kept failing. Slowly, his obsession began pushing him toward madness. Eventually, a disturbing idea began to form in his mind. Perhaps human bodies needed to be included in the experiments to improve the biological chain he was trying to create. Driven by this twisted logic, he began secretly capturing drunkards and drug addicts from the streets to use as test subjects. In Valerio's eyes, the only missing component needed to complete his research was the human element itself. One day, his assistant brought him a report showing the results of sample number 48. The toxin's infectivity had increased significantly, but it also produced a dangerous side effect. It increased the rate of cancer in humans by nearly 10 times. Instead of being alarmed, Valerio simply smiled slightly. To him, the improved infectivity proved that his research was moving in the right direction. He decided to continue experimenting on humans in order to refine the toxin while reducing its harmful effects on ordinary people. Meanwhile, during routine work in the lab, Leland accidentally cut his finger, and a small drop of blood began to flow from the wound. Despite earlier warnings from Valerio about maintaining strict safety procedures, the minor accident was quickly forgotten. However, one day while observing samples through a microscope, Valerio suddenly froze in shock. To his surprise, he detected signs of poison activity within Leland's blood. This unexpected discovery led Valerio to propose a strange theory that exceptionally gifted humans might actually represent another evolutionary form similar to demonic beasts. If that theory was correct, then his own assistants might be the perfect experimental subjects to test it. Valerio began carefully reflecting on the biological similarities between humans and demonic beasts. Both species possess the ability to evolve and mutate over time, and some humans naturally developed extraordinary abilities similar to those of demonic beasts. These gifted individuals possessed strength far beyond that of ordinary warriors. Unlike typical fighters, they did not need years of training to unlock their power. After thinking deeply about this revelation, Valerio made a shocking and radical decision. He conducted an experiment using sample 48 on specially gifted individuals, successfully completing the infection chain he had been trying to create. When the results of the experiment appeared, Valerio stared at the data in stunned disbelief. He realized that the genocidal weapon he had created could wipe out all demonic beasts, but it also possessed the terrifying ability to destroy humans as well. Although the toxin seemed mostly harmless to ordinary people, Leon clicked his tongue calmly, clearly not surprised by the revelation and quietly agreeing with Serenity's earlier warning. Serenity angrily accused Valerio, pointing out that Vincent and Leland had blindly followed his research even at the risk of their own lives. Together, they had helped develop a deadly toxin that eventually infected everyone exposed to sample 48. Valerio's eyes flashed with anger and his teeth clenched tightly as Serenity continued scolding him, accusing him of accidentally spreading the infection. Despite his attempts to control the situation, the infection eventually spread throughout the entire trading district. Families, ordinary residents, and even gifted individuals were affected, their powers grew stronger while their health rapidly declined. Mateo himself, who was one of those specially gifted individuals, could hardly believe the terrifying truth he had just heard. When someone asked Valerio directly whether the toxin could kill humans, he avoided giving a clear answer. Instead, he simply said that only specially gifted individuals faced real danger, while ordinary people were unlikely to die from it. Vivian quietly lowered her head, realizing that she and the other gifted individuals might not escape the toxin's effects, since their origins were connected to demonic beasts. Even so, Valerio stubbornly insisted that the situation could still be controlled if he continued his research and focused on perfecting the weapon against demonic beasts. But Vivian suddenly raised her voice in anger, challenging Valerio's belief that humans and demonic beasts truly shared the same biological roots. She spoke firmly, explaining that from the perspective of demonic beasts, killing humans was not an act of cruelty, but simply a matter of survival. According to the natural laws of their world, stronger creatures hunted weaker ones in order to live. Valerio flinched slightly at her words. With a bitter expression, he admitted that it was impossible to create a toxin that would only affect demonic beasts while leaving every other living creature untouched. His voice turned heavy as he confessed that his true motivation had always been revenge. He had wanted to avenge the deaths of his parents by wiping out all demonic beasts, even if innocent human lives were lost in the process. Only now did he fully understand the terrible consequences his research could bring. Vivian stared at her brother in disbelief and quietly asked him whether he had truly intended to destroy the entire world from the very beginning. She struggled to accept the idea that he might have been willing to kill every living creature, including his own sister, just to achieve his goal. Valerio slowly became aware of the horror of his own actions. He could not understand how his desire for revenge had pushed him toward a path that could lead to the destruction of all life on Earth. At first, he believed he only wanted to eliminate demons. But now the truth was clear. If his plan succeeded, countless human warriors would also die, including his own sister. Deep down, he realized that he had known this possibility all along. In fact, the thought had been buried in his mind for a very long time. Yet despite knowing the truth, he never understood what he should do or how to stop the path he had already chosen. Valerio found it impossible to accept the idea that he would have to forget the murder of his parents and live in a world where demons continued to exist. In his heart, he believed that humans and demons simply could not exist together peacefully. His parents had died right before his eyes while protecting him. That painful memory remained burned into his mind, and he could not understand why he should tolerate the existence of demons after what they had done. Tears slowly filled Valerio's eyes as the memories overwhelmed him. Vivian suddenly began blaming herself, apologizing again and again for leaving him alone after their parents had sacrificed their lives. She regretted deeply that she had not stayed by his side to support him emotionally. In her mind, her absence had allowed him to sink into loneliness and pain for so many years. Valerio trembled slightly before pulling his sister into a tight embrace. In that moment, he realized just how much loneliness and silent suffering he had carried since childhood. Serenity let out a quiet sigh as she watched them. Her gaze remained cold as she looked at Valerio, while Rooster and Levi stood nearby, without moving. Mateo and Lion also watched the emotional scene between the siblings with gloomy expressions. Vivian clung to her brother tightly and burst into tears, saying that his long years of isolation had trapped him in the past and prevented him from moving forward. Valerio held his sister just as tightly and began crying as well, finally realizing the weight of everything that had happened during all those years. Everyone present stood silently, watching the painful conversation between brother and sister unfold before them. Suddenly, a warning signal flashed in Levi's mind. His system alerted him to danger. Sharp, poisonous rows-like projectiles were flying rapidly toward his back. The rooster reacted instantly. Spreading his feathers, he deflected the incoming attack and shielded Levi from the deadly strike. After blocking the attack, he looked at Levi with irritation and asked him mockingly why he had not even bothered to dodge. Just then, a powerful voice echoed through the room as Titus entered, breaking the tense silence. Zoel and the small demon child immediately brightened when they saw the king appear. However, Zoe quickly raised her hand to stop her husband from approaching too closely, worried about the risk of physical contact. She explained that she had already been exposed to the poisonous power spreading through the area. Using her spiritual power to support her body, Zoe stood upright and addressed the group of cultivators led by Levi. She informed them that the ordinary citizens of Chanhe were currently safe inside their homes under the protection of her people. However, the Changi warriors had been captured and were now imprisoned inside a special department building guarded by her subordinates. She spoke with open contempt for those who harbored hatred toward her people and declared that justice must be served for Vincent and Leland. The demon woman continued by stating that all individuals responsible for creating the poison and tormenting her relatives had already been punished appropriately. At the same time, she promised that her people would not take revenge against those who were not directly involved in the poison research. Until now, they had deliberately avoided harming ordinary humans. However, the situation had reached a point where they were prepared to give the humans a choice. Zoel calmly presented Levi's group with two possible options. They could either guarantee the safety of every person in Sanchi and protect them from her people, or they could hand over Valerio along with the final vial of poison in his possession. Zoel declared that Valerio must face punishment for the death of their child and for the cruel suffering he had inflicted upon their people. Vivian's face filled with fear as she listened to Zoel calmly state those harsh conditions. Zoel coldly warned that if they refused her demands, she would destroy all of Choni. Behind her, a group of powerful demons stood ready, awaiting the humans' decision. Zoel's icy voice echoed across the room, sending chills down the spines of Mateo and Lion. Unlike the others, Serenity remained calm and composed as she carefully analyzed the situation. She reasoned that the enemy must have already been weakened before they arrived. She suspected that Vivian had led the rescue operation that infiltrated Sangshi. Although Vivian was a continental-ranked healer, she lacked combat ability. Mateo and Leon were both national-ranked warriors, and Serenity knew their fighting strategies well. However, she understood that without Valerio and his unusual talents, they would have no realistic chance of defeating Zoe. In her mind, their only possible advantage came from the two individuals whose abilities she still could not fully understand, along with the national-ranked demon present. After considering everything, Serenity turned toward Levi and warned that if they angered Zoe, the entire city could be destroyed. Since Levi was the strongest among them, she believed the final decision should be his. The main character remained silent for a moment, clearly thinking deeply about the situation. After a brief pause, he slowly turned his head and looked directly at Vivian. Serenity guessed that Levi wanted Vivian, as a continental-ranked individual, to make the difficult decision herself. Feeling the heavy weight of everyone's expectations, Vivian looked around at the people staring at her. Finally, she turned toward her brother and urged him to admit the terrible mistakes he had made. Valerio stood there in disbelief, struggling to accept that his actions might truly have been wrong. Then Vivian suddenly shouted, telling him loudly that he had indeed committed a huge and unforgivable mistake. After a long silence, Valerio finally lowered his head and admitted that he had been wrong. With tears in her eyes, Vivian hugged him tightly and reminded him of the terrible consequences of his actions, begging him never to repeat such mistakes again. Then, without warning, she delivered a powerful blow to the back of Valerio's head, knocking him unconscious. His body collapsed heavily to the floor as he lost consciousness. Vivian then looked firmly at Zoel and declared that she was willing to hand over Valerio along with the final vial of poison. She knew that the people and cultivators of Kangi had already been exposed to the toxin, which could greatly increase cancer rates and threaten countless lives. Leaving the situation unresolved was simply impossible. Therefore, Vivian proposed a peace agreement. She suggested that the Sanchi cultivators and herself would continue working together with the demons to develop an antidote while also ensuring Serenity's safety. Watching silently, Serenity felt a deep sense of admiration for Vivian. She realized that Vivian had chosen to sacrifice the only remaining member of her family for the sake of the greater good, proving both her wisdom and her noble character. The tight, suffocating tension in the air finally began to loosen when Vivin carefully finished crafting the Blood Covenant talisman. As the last symbol settled into place, it felt as though an invisible weight lifted from everyone present, the ritual object quietly radiating a solemn and binding authority. With Vivin guiding the process step by step, she and Zoe completed the pact in the most ancient way possible, through blood. Their crimson drops touched the talisman, sealing the agreement with a grim sincerity that neither side could easily betray. Through this ritual, both sides became bound by promises that carried grave consequences. The covenant was not merely symbolic. If either party broke their word, the backlash would be severe, a punishment written directly into the magic of the talisman itself. Then it was the Demon Queen's turn. When Zoel pricked her finger and let her blood fall onto the talisman, an unseen force seemed to ripple through the space. Though invisible to the eye, it felt as if heavy chains had quietly wrapped around Vivin and the Queen, locking their fates together. After the ritual ended, Vivin took out the final vial of poison and handed it over without hesitation. She spoke calmly, expressing her belief that under Zoe's rule, Sanchi could become a place where humans and demonic beasts might finally learn to coexist in fragile but genuine peace. Before departing, Vivin wanted just one more moment with her brother. Yet when she approached him, she noticed he appeared to be asleep, his breathing calm and his face strangely peaceful, as if unaware of everything that had just transpired. Softly, she spoke to him anyway. She told him she loved him and urged him to keep living, this time without repeating the mistakes of the past. Her words carried both regret and hope, a quiet acknowledgement of her own flaws as well. Moments later, Vivin's strength finally gave out. Her vision blurred and she collapsed. Mateo immediately rushed to her side, kneeling down in alarm as he tried desperately to wake her and pull her back to consciousness. Sometime later, the group slowly made their way out of the area. They traveled back through the forest together, the quiet rustling of leaves accompanying their heavy steps as they returned toward home. After a while, Vivin finally regained consciousness. Her eyes opened slowly, and she looked around in confusion, clearly disoriented as she tried to understand where she was and what had happened. The twins, Julian and Giselle, gently explained the situation. They were currently near the outskirts of Chengxi, waiting for their leader to finalize matters and discuss the future of the peace treaty. They hoped Tangxi would eventually become a symbol of harmony, a place where humans and demonic beasts could live side by side under Zoe's protection. Suddenly, Vivin covered her face with both hands in sheer horror. A piercing scream burst from her throat as she demanded that they let her go. Her voice echoed sharply across the surroundings of Sani, filled with panic and despair. Mateo, looking a bit awkward and worried, quickly reassured her that everything was all right. He explained that he wasn't exhausted. He had simply been carrying her the entire time after she fainted. But Vivin had already lost her composure. Her claws shot forward as she grabbed Mateo angrily, her voice shaking as she demanded that he release her immediately. Confused by her sudden outburst, Mateo and Lion exchanged puzzled looks. Instinctively, they glanced around the area, as though searching for someone who might explain Vivin's strange behavior. Vivin called out anxiously, her face turning pale. Her voice trembled as she shouted that she needed to return to Tangxi right away, as if something terrible had happened there. Mateo watched her with deep concern. As he studied her distressed expression, his mind drifted back to everything that had happened since the moment she lost consciousness. At the same time, memories flooded Vivin's mind. She remembered the moment they first met Zoel, the chilling demand that the people surrender Valerio. The girl began to run desperately, her thoughts replaying that tense meeting again and again like a haunting echo she couldn't escape. In her memories, she saw herself embracing her brother one final time. She had whispered to him that if his life was ever truly in danger, he must use that thing. She had already accepted that whatever happened afterward no longer mattered. For her, the only thing that truly mattered was that he survived. In truth, Vivin had already made her decision. Using the Wang family's forbidden life protection technique, a method that could only be used once in a lifetime, she chose to exchange souls with her brother to save him. Right after the peace treaty with the demonic beasts was signed, Valerio rushed toward the execution grounds. Inside the body that once belonged to his sister, He ran desperately to the place where her fate had already been sealed. Only a handful of brave, or perhaps curious, city residents dared to gather in the square to witness the execution that was about to take place. Tears quickly filled Valerio's eyes when he saw the horrifying scene before him. His sister was being punished by the demonic beasts in the same brutal way he had once punished them. She was crucified in the square, arrows and wooden stakes piercing through her body. Standing before the execution platform was a small demon soldier, calmly drawing a bow and aiming an arrow toward a helpless man. The prince had chosen a terrifying punishment, death by 1,000 arrows. And perhaps in that dreadful moment, Valerio finally understood the weight of his own mistakes. Shaking uncontrollably, the real Valerio whispered in agony that it was he who had forced his sister into making such a painful and impossible decision. Even while facing the threat of execution, Vivian said nothing. Her heart had been torn apart between two choices, her own brother on one side, and the innocent citizens and warriors of Tangxi on the other. She simply could not bring herself to choose her own family and ignore the countless people of Sani. And yet, as a sister, she also could not accept the idea that Valeria should die as well, no matter how terrible his past actions had been. In the end, Vivian sacrificed herself because it was the only path left that could save her brother. Now, as she felt the strange comfort of being reunited with her parents in spirit, she quietly believed she had made the right decision. Later, Matteo found Vivian unconscious again and carried her away. The twins whispered quietly to each other, realizing just how deeply devastated Vivian truly was after her brother's death. Although Tangxi had gained a reputation as a model city where humans and demonic beasts coexisted peacefully, the lingering toxic aura made it dangerous. Other demonic beasts, and especially powerful warriors, still did not dare to enter the city freely. Even ordinary people traveling to the city would need protection for the foreseeable future, as the environment remained unstable and unpredictable. As they continued along the road, everyone stared ahead nervously. Suddenly, they saw Zul appear before them, accompanied by the prince consorts. It soon became clear that she had come for a specific purpose, to retrieve Tori's ashes. The rooster was stunned when the overlord revealed that Tori carried the bloodline of an ancient divine phoenix. She claimed there was a method that could allow Tori to be reborn from those ashes. As she spoke, a strange energy began to flow from the demon's necklace, gently surrounding the ashes. Everyone watched silently, their eyes wide with amazement as she began performing the mysterious resurrection technique. A surge of powerful energy enveloped the ashes, transforming them into a radiant five-colored egg. With surprising care, the queen handed the glowing egg back to the rooster. Jasper suddenly shouted in shock, but before he could finish his sentence, one of the beads from the overlord's necklace shot forward and embedded itself into his forehead like a strange third eye. Everyone stood frozen, completely stunned by the unexpected scene that had just unfolded. Even the demons themselves were momentarily speechless, staring in disbelief. The twins' expressions darkened as they whispered anxiously about what this incident might mean. They worried that the elder might have accidentally seized someone else's treasure right after the peace treaty was signed. Meanwhile, Jasper swayed slightly, muttering that he felt extremely uncomfortable. Zoe exclaimed in surprise, realizing that Jasper's body was overflowing with energy because he had recklessly absorbed the power contained within the treasure bead. She warned everyone that the sudden surge of power could cause Jasper to explode or possibly fall into a deep coma. Right before everyone's eyes, Jasper suddenly tumbled down from Levi's head in fright. Seeing that Jasper had returned to his normal size, Levi quickly hugged him and noted with amazement that he now possessed tremendous power, so much that he had even broken the shrinking effect earlier than expected. The three demons stared at him closely, unsure whether Jasper had survived the ordeal. But their expressions changed instantly when they heard the white-haired boy shout energetically that he felt full of strength and completely fine. Zoella muttered in disbelief, shocked that Jasper had not died, and had even managed to successfully absorb the treasure bead's power. She speculated that Jasper's ability to absorb the power might be connected to his mysterious link with the descendant of her ancient benefactor. Her thoughts drifted back 1,000 years to the foot of Mount Sani, recalling the moment when she had once been gravely injured. At that time, she had been attacked by a powerful alpha wolf while already locked in battle with the queen bee. Through the haze of pain, she suddenly noticed the silhouette of a human standing in the distance. She assumed he would finish her off the moment he approached. Instead, a small monk walked toward her with genuine compassion and quietly asked if she had been wounded. Fear flickered in Zol's mind as she asked him cautiously what he intended to do. To her surprise, the boy simply offered her a healing stone, explaining that it could help restore her injuries. Zoel was completely stunned by the monk's kindness. Rather than killing the demon when he had the chance, he chose to help her heal instead. Only then did she finally tell him the truth, that she was not human at all. However, the young monk calmly shook his head and answered with quiet sincerity that, to someone who followed the path of Buddhism, every life carried the same value. Whether human or demon, he believed that all living beings deserved compassion and mercy. Before leaving, the little monk gently placed the treasure in her hands. Then he turned toward the western road and began his journey again, telling her with a soft smile that he would come back one day to retrieve the pendant when he passed through this place on his return. After her wounds healed, Zoel often returned to the riverside where they had met. Year after year, she waited patiently, believing that the monk would keep his promise. Decades passed, then centuries slipped by, yet she continued to visit the same spot. As time moved forward, the lonely mountain gradually transformed into a bustling city filled with people. Despite the changes all around her, the monk never returned to reclaim the treasure he had left behind. Back in the present moment, Zoel stared closely at Jasper with a spark of excitement in her eyes. With hopeful curiosity, she asked him directly if he might be a descendant of the kind monk who had once saved her life. Jasper blinked in confusion, clearly unsure what Zoel was talking about. Her sudden question left him scratching his head, completely puzzled by the strange connection she seemed to believe existed. Everyone standing nearby was equally surprised to hear the powerful demon lady speak to Jasper in such a respectful and emotional tone. She calmly explained that the glowing bead originally belonged to her long-ago benefactor. The fact that Jasper could absorb its power without suffering any harm suggested that he shared some kind of connection with that person. The demons then expressed their gratitude toward Jasper, thanking him sincerely for protecting the bead and keeping it safe through all those years. Now convinced that Jasper truly carried the bloodline of her benefactor, the demon mistress decided to give him a special gift. She formed a thin thread of spiritual power, woven directly from her own will, and prepared to pass it to him. She explained that this invisible thread would remain hidden inside Jasper unless he chose to activate it. Whenever he needed help, he only had to tear the thread with his hand, and it would summon her power instantly. Curious and a little impatient, Jasper decided to test the strange ability right away. The moment he snapped the thread apart, Zoel suddenly appeared beside him as if she had been summoned from nowhere. The demon queen sighed helplessly and reminded him once again that he should not call her casually unless there was a real emergency. After exchanging their final farewells with the demon lord, Levi's group began heading straight toward the designated landing zone. The twins lifted their heads and watched the sky carefully, waiting for the planes and helicopters that headquarters had sent to retrieve them. Meanwhile, Jasper's eyes sparkled with excitement as he looked over at Levi with an eager expression. With a mischievous grin, he said he really wanted to test his brand-new acupuncture technique on Levi and see what kind of results it would produce. Not long after, several helicopters sent from the capital appeared in the sky and slowly approached to pick up the group. Inside one of the helicopters were two powerful warriors who held the rank of continental-level cultivators. They were discussing Levi with curiosity, clearly impressed that he had managed to defeat Zul and force her to agree to a peace treaty with humanity. Geo, a respected warrior from the Supreme Taoist Academy, speculated that Levi's strength might already surpass the level of a national guardian. He even suggested that Levi might have reached the legendary level known as a sovereign. Berkeley, another elite warrior who came from the highest Buddhist academy, nodded in agreement and admitted that Levi's combat ability was truly extraordinary. Geo added thoughtfully that if Berkeley's guess turned out to be correct, Levi's existence could become a historic turning point. not only for their country, but possibly for nations all around the world. After a while, Giselle suddenly brightened with excitement when she spotted a helicopter from headquarters finally arriving to pick them up. She felt deeply honored when she realized that the famous cultivators Gio and Berkeley had personally come to escort them back on behalf of headquarters. Gio warmly thanked the entire team for their brave efforts during the dangerous mission to save the city of Kongsher. With a concerned expression, Gio then asked Matteo what had happened to Valerio and Vivian during the operation. Matteo explained that Vivian was physically fine. However, after witnessing Valerio's death, the overwhelming grief had caused her to faint from emotional exhaustion. Gio let out a heavy sigh when he learned that the headquarters had already received a report about Valerio's case, which meant the authorities would soon take action. While observing the group, Gio suddenly noticed a demon standing beside the two young masters. From the situation, it seemed these young cultivators had been specially invited from Yanhai to deal with a demonic beast of such terrifying strength. Their help had clearly been crucial. Meanwhile, Levi was lying on the grass completely unconscious, several acupuncture needles still stuck in his head. Seeing him motionless like that only made Gio believe even more strongly in the young man's incredible power. Gio was surprised to notice Levi's slow, uneven breathing, which made it look like he had completely lost consciousness. He quietly assumed that Jasper's acupuncture technique must be extremely powerful. Sitting beside Levi, Jasper scratched his head awkwardly and admitted with some regret that his acupuncture technique had accidentally knocked Levi out. After hearing that explanation, Gio began to doubt his original guess. He started to wonder whether Levi had truly fainted from the acupuncture needles. Gio studied Jasper carefully and guessed that he might be another powerful cultivator on Levi's team. Strangely, however, he could not sense any obvious combat power coming from the young man. Not long afterward, Gio ordered everyone to board the helicopter so they could return safely to headquarters. Before departure, he used a special testing technique on the warriors to confirm that none of them were infected with the dangerous virus. Once satisfied, he told them they were free to return. Gio reassured them that the craftsmen and medical staff at headquarters would take good care of their recovery. Before leaving the area, Lion quietly reflected that they had been extremely lucky to escape safely, because none of them would have been able to defeat Zoel in a direct battle. After discussing several remaining matters, Gio and Berkeley finally returned to the capital. At that time, on the rooftop of the Special Department headquarters building in the capital city of Lungo, two figures were already standing there waiting for the helicopter's arrival. The long-haired man suddenly sensed a powerful aura coming from the helicopter, the unmistakable energy of a national-level demon. The man was a continental-rank warrior named Cases. With excitement in his voice, he announced that the team had finally arrived. When Cases noticed Lion stepping out of the helicopter, he quietly muttered with relief that Lion had finally returned safely. Looking at the people exiting the aircraft, Cases quickly recognized them as Team 66 from Yanhai City. Hidden quietly inside the rooster's necklace, Isaac remained completely unnoticed by everyone present. Soon the deep voice of the commander echoed across the rooftop. He praised the team, explaining that the rescue mission had been extremely difficult and that their efforts had made an enormous contribution. They had accomplished what many believed was an impossible task. He instructed them to rest for now, promising that later the members of the rescue team would receive the honors and recognition they truly deserved. By evening, Valerio had been transferred to the central hospital in the capital for treatment. Doctors placed him in a comfortable high-grade ward where they could carefully monitor his condition. Suddenly, tears began rolling down his cheeks as though he were trapped inside a terrible nightmare. In his dream, he saw demons mercilessly tormenting the real Vivian. Valerio had walked this path of vengeance to avenge his parents and restore justice for those he loved. All he ever wanted was to protect everyone around him. He had been willing to sacrifice anything to keep them safe. Yet the one thing Valerio could never endure was watching the people he loved die right before his eyes. His sister was now the only family he had left. How could he possibly stand by and watch her die because of his own actions? Everything had begun because of him. If that was true, then he believed he should be the one to end it as well. Perhaps he had been wrong from the very beginning. Or perhaps he had not. But at that moment none of that mattered anymore. All Valerio wished for was that his sister would stay strong and live a peaceful life. Yet because their souls were still connected, he could sense that after enduring so much suffering, Vivian's life force had slowly faded away and her eyes had finally closed forever. When the fake Vivian suddenly woke up, she burst into tears and cried out desperately, calling for her sister again and again. At that moment, Mateo rushed in with excitement, announcing that Sister Vivian had finally awakened. Vivian looked at him with teary eyes and softly asked if he had really been standing guard outside the whole time. Mateo's face flushed bright red as he awkwardly scratched the back of his head. Stammering nervously, he explained that since she hadn't woken up for so long, he simply couldn't bring himself to leave her alone in the room. When Vivian softly thanked him for staying by her side, Mateo became even more embarrassed. Waving his hands in a panic, he quickly insisted that it really wasn't a big deal and that she didn't need to thank him at all. Feeling too shy to remain in the room any longer, he suddenly stood up and hurried out, mumbling that he would go buy something warm for Vivian to eat. As Vivian sat quietly on the bed, still mourning the loss of her brother, the commander suddenly entered the room. In a calm but serious tone, he explained that for demonic beasts, consuming humans had always been the fastest way to evolve and gain power. He continued thoughtfully, saying that from a theoretical standpoint, humans and demonic beasts could rarely coexist peacefully unless both sides shared a powerful enemy that forced them to stand together. After studying Valerio's past actions and beliefs, the commander admitted that it seemed Valerio strongly opposed the idea of humans and demonic beasts living in harmony. Yet in Conchar City, the circumstances had changed. There, humans and demonic beasts had no choice but to coexist peacefully if they wanted to survive. Vivian's eyes widened slightly when the commander explained further. He revealed that the reason for this fragile cooperation was the deadly poison that Juan Valerio had researched before his departure. After a short silence, the commander quietly told her that he had secretly transported Valerio's remains from the city of Tanchi and arranged for them to be buried beside the graves of her parents. However, he stressed that this information had to remain confidential. No one else could know, only Vivian. She thanked him sincerely, but after a pause he shook his head and replied that there was nothing to thank him for. If that poison had spread unchecked, it might have wiped out all life on Earth. He added with a heavy sigh that Valerio's existence had been more like a catastrophe than a blessing. Yet at the same time, his actions had forced demonic beasts to evolve intellectually and realize that humanity was not as weak as they once believed. Vivian broke into tears as she listened. The commander quietly admitted that if humanity truly reached extinction, the consequences would be unimaginable. Still, he refused to judge whether Valerio's methods had been right or wrong, acknowledging that they themselves had accomplished far less than he had. Later, at the cemetery, Vivian knelt silently before an unmarked grave beside her parents' tombstones. With tears in her eyes, she resolved that from now on she would focus on protecting the living people of Changi, believing that safeguarding lives mattered far more than chasing revenge. 3 days later, Levi suddenly woke up when a rooster feather tickled his nose. Jasper, who had been watching over him, immediately burst with excitement when he saw Levi open his eyes again. At the same moment, the system inside Levi's mind reported in disbelief that its master had finally awakened. His life force had fully recovered, and astonishingly, he had even broken past physical limits to reach the heavenly level ahead of time. Jasper complained that Levi had been snoring for 3 whole days without waking up. Meanwhile, Levi noticed his body felt much stronger than before and muttered thanks to the system, even though it seemed reluctant to respond. The system quietly wondered whether it had somehow become useless. Jasper's eyes sparkled as he eagerly asked Levi if the world rotation technique had succeeded. Levi nodded calmly and confirmed that it had worked perfectly. Just then, Gio walked into the room. Seeing Levi awake, he smiled in a thoughtful and somewhat meaningful way. Gio explained that the commander had requested Levi's presence in the headquarters force assessment room. Levi and Jasper both froze in confusion, clearly unsure what this strange request meant. Inside the combat evaluation chamber, the commander and several national leaders stared silently at the data displayed on the testing equipment screen. Meanwhile, Gio became even more convinced that his earlier judgment had been correct. Levi's aura felt surprisingly weak for someone who supposedly possessed such terrifying power. The commander then quietly asked the three national leaders whether the rescuers' report about Levi's strength might have been inaccurate. Geo wondered aloud whether Levi might possess unstable combat power that fluctuated unpredictably. The commander began considering whether there might be another method to properly evaluate the young man's true strength. Berkeley hesitated for a moment before suggesting that they could arrange a surprise mock battle. Just then, someone realized that Jasper and Levi had quietly disappeared. Meanwhile, the two boys had wandered into a training field where a group of bald-headed students stood in line waiting to be tested for their combat skills. Jasper curiously asked what kind of game they were playing, remarking that it looked pretty amusing. The instructor carefully explained the test to one of the students, emphasizing that the mystical steel wall was extremely tough. To break it, one needed to gather defensive energy into the fist before striking. Taking a deep breath, the student focused his strength into his arm and threw a powerful punch toward the mystical steel wall. When the instructor announced that the strike had reached the 6th level of strength, the student beamed with excitement. One of the students nearby suddenly noticed Levi and Jasper and recognized them as the two talented individuals who had recently become famous. Some irritated disciples shouted angrily, saying that this was the headquarters training ground for Buddhist cultivators to test their defensive strength. They warned that if ordinary people struck mystical steel with bare hands, they could easily break their bones. At that moment, the instructor called another student forward for inspection, reminding him sternly not to let those arrogant newcomers distract him and ruin his performance. The student quickly focused his strength and punched the mystical steel wall again. The staff member announced proudly that the result had reached level 7, marking a major improvement. Jasper leaned toward Levi and whispered if he wanted to try it too. When Levi and Jasper approached the mystical steel wall, the instructor asked if they were really planning to attempt the test. Several Buddhist disciples mocked them, claiming that foolish outsiders were about to learn how strong Buddhist cultivators truly were. Jasper gathered all his strength and raised his fist enthusiastically, laughing as he said this strange game looked incredibly fun. However, the moment his fist struck the mystical steel wall, the supervisor sighed and calmly announced that the defensive impact result was 0. Jasper's body trembled with embarrassment as the surrounding Buddhist cultivators burst into laughter. It was the first time they had ever heard of someone scoring a 0-level result. Seeing Jasper clutch his swollen hand in pain, Levi simply ignored the mocking laughter from the Buddhist cultivators around them. Levi calmly stepped forward to strike the mystical steel wall himself. Before he could punch, several cultivators sneered, warning that such a test was not meant for pale-faced youngsters like him. Without saying a word, Levi gathered his power and released a thunderous punch that shattered the mystical steel wall instantly, leaving the surrounding cultivators frozen in complete shock. With a single blow, Levi pierced through the legendary mystical steel wall that had remained unbroken since ancient times. The manager stared in horror, completely stunned by the unbelievable strength displayed by the young man. Just then the commander and his group arrived, and the entire area fell silent. Geo stared in disbelief and asked the three warriors beside him whether this level truly belonged to an overlord. The commander confirmed that Levi had indeed reached the rank of overlord. After releasing his frustration, Levi walked over to Jasper and asked if his hand still hurt. He casually explained that he had destroyed the mystical steel wall just to avenge Jasper. Jasper grinned happily and thanked Levi. Using his system glasses, Levi quickly purchased a healing potion to help treat Jasper's injured hand. At that moment, the commander approached Levi and said he wanted to discuss something important. Meanwhile, the Buddhist cultivators turned pale after hearing Geo warn that anyone who leaked what they had witnessed would face severe punishment. Later, inside the senior leadership meeting room at the very top of headquarters, Levi and the commander sat facing each other. The commander explained that he wanted to invite Levi to remain at headquarters and serve as the new high guard responsible for protecting the capital. Neither Levi nor Jasper fully understood what this position meant, so the masked man clarified that their country had not produced a supreme cultivator in 200 years. Levi's presence had therefore become extremely valuable. Levi asked uncertainly whether he was expected to stay in the capital permanently and wondered what would happen to Jasper if he accepted. The commander reassured him that headquarters could easily arrange a special flight to send Jasper safely back to Yanhai City. Suddenly, Levi turned away coldly and stated firmly that he had no intention of staying there. The commander looked confused by this unexpected refusal. Understanding Levi's protective attitude, the commander cautiously asked whether Jasper might be willing to remain in the capital instead. Jasper gently shook his head and said he preferred to return home. The unfamiliar capital made him uncomfortable, and he quietly admitted to Levi that he missed the director and felt homesick after being away for so long. Levi nodded firmly and confirmed that both of them planned to return home together. After thinking it over, the commander revealed that headquarters had already learned that Wanai served as their guardian. It seemed clear that Levi felt a strong sense of loyalty and belonging to Yanhai City. After carefully analyzing the situation, the commander considered two options: either convince Levi to remain at headquarters or invite One-Eye to discuss the matter. Soon he made up his mind. 2 days later, One-Eye arrived at headquarters while another warrior temporarily took responsibility for guarding Yanhai City. When the commander privately informed him that Levi had reached the highest combat rank, One-Eye was completely shocked. The commander also explained that Levi and Jasper had been insisting on returning home, so he planned to offer them a very generous contract to guard the headquarters temporarily. The one-eyed man's eyes lit up with excitement as he immediately sensed a huge opportunity to make money. The commander proposed inviting Levi to join a special unit connected to the Yanhai headquarters and even offered 10 times the normal payment. Considering Levi's supreme rank, he eventually raised the offer to 100 times more while pretending to speak purely out of concern for the capital's safety. Hearing this proposal, One-Eye laughed jokingly and said he might as well sell Levi and Jasper outright for such a ridiculous price. Before heading toward headquarters, Tracy pulled One-Eye aside and warned him in a serious tone. She told him that the rescue team had already completed their mission and safely returned, and that headquarters had contacted him immediately after discovering Levi's astonishing true abilities. She explained that once headquarters analyzed Levi's combat strength, it was almost certain they would raise the issue of keeping him in the capital as a permanent defender. The commander had summoned One-Eye precisely because Levi had refused to stay, hoping One-Eye could persuade him to reconsider. Tracy then fixed One-Eye with a stern look and firmly reminded him that no matter what tempting conditions the old commander might offer, he must never agree to let Levi remain behind to guard headquarters. Because of those words, when the moment arrived, the man suddenly stopped himself mid-sentence and declared stubbornly that he would only sell those boys over his dead body. In that instant, Tracy's warning echoed clearly in his mind, reminding him again that he absolutely must not agree to such a deal. The commander narrowed his eyes suspiciously and asked One-Eye why he had refused such an extremely generous and profitable arrangement. But the truth behind the matter was far more complicated. First of all, Tracy had told him that Levi and Jasper were technically patients from a psychiatric institute whose condition could not truly be cured. Secondly, if the two of them stayed at headquarters for too long, their unusual behavior might eventually expose their condition. If that happened, Levi's combat strength might be dismissed entirely, and the two of them could even end up imprisoned. Besides that, Levi himself felt like a ticking time bomb, powerful but unpredictable. One-Eye lowered his head slightly and apologized, saying he simply could not allow Levi and Jasper to remain at headquarters. The commander looked genuinely confused, unable to understand why anyone would refuse such a valuable offer.